Hi, my name's Darren and welcome to my workshop. And this one feels like goodbye, this one feels like a funeral. Not that the channel's going anywhere, but you probably recognise this workbench, and she is going. I'm in the process of building a new one, which puts me in a quandary because I want to build the new one, or want to have the new one in the same place this is now, but I need this to assemble the new one. Tricky. I'm going to have to do it in frames, put the frames to the side, destroy this, well, dismantle this, and then put the new one in place. It'll be an interesting process, to say the least. Even though I've had two vices on this bench, a face vice and a tail vice, I'll only be putting a face vice on the new one. I didn't really use the tail vice. I've got 3 of these large tabletops to break down, and they're a bit too big for the table saw. So I'm going to use some in-feed and out-feed rollers. I've ripped the tops of those tables down into just over 70mm wide strips. So you can see that this piece of wood is bowed. The table itself was bowed from years of use, or tables. All 3 of them. This one too is bowed, although not as severely. So what I'm going to do to try and pull the bow out of them is glue them face to face like that. So basically you can see here we've got a huge gap between them in the center there because of the bow, but we're going to clamp them together and glue them in place, and then hopefully with the 2 bows pulling away from each other we'll end up with a straight piece of timber. That's the plan. I now have the components for the new workbench. This piece of MDF is going to be the top, and down here you can see I've ripped up the old tabletops and glued them into strips, so each what looks like 2 beams is now 1 beam effectively, and so that's what I'll actually be building the frame of the bench out of. Here you can see a beam actually being clamped together, so I glued that one yesterday. It's had time to dry overnight, and so I will plane that down and we will have beams, another beam to add to the collection of beams. The ones you just saw in the big stack haven't been jointed yet. Those 3 there on the bench have been jointed on 2 faces. So I've cut all the legs ready to go. Now I've got to cut the rails, and the rails are going to be 1740 long. So 10 legs in total, so it's going to be pretty strong, but the front panel is only going to have 4 of those 10 legs. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark them out for my lap joints. There we are. And that's what I'll be cutting out of the front face. So I'm just going to double check that in the second spot just to make sure. Yep, okay, good. So what that will give me now is that width from any of the ends, which is what I need all over the place, because I've got to cut the all of the ends that way. Every one of these pieces of wood for that lap. So this thing's going to get its work out now, let me tell you. So.
Just going to tighten that up because that's kind of annoying. There we go. And one.
Alright, so that's all that marked out, but how deep's the cut got to be? Well, the cut's got to be half this width. So, let's measure that and set a second gauge for that height. And they should be, what, 40 something, 46. Just very quickly, a lap joint is where you cut out half, or a half lap joint is where you cut out a section of timber halfway through the wood on one piece. Do the same on the other, and when you then connect them, usually at 90 degrees, although you can go straight, they end up being the same width but lapping over each other, hence the name lap joint. Now I'm pretty sure I've got the correct depth of cut dialed in over there on the Capex saw, but I'm going to test it on an off cut first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this in half. Actually, first of all, I'll cut my my two lap joints and then cut it in half, join them and see. I won't do a full lap joint, I'll just do a couple of little strokes just to bring it in at the edges, then cut it in half and test it. There. Let's try it. Just up. Let's try that. I think that's still a little bit higher than I need, but we'll give that a try and see how we go. Let's give them a try. Obviously I would clean them up a little bit with a chisel normally, but this is just a test fit to see how we go. First thing, I haven't cut them both the same length. Obviously I would do that ordinarily, but that's good. Yep, so I've got the height set perfectly on there. What I might just do is just quickly clean that up with a chisel, and once it's cleaned up, check the height again, just in case I need to leave a little bit of chisel room in there. Just a little bit. Alright, so I'm just trying to smooth the surface here a little, that's all. There we go. No, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Look at that gap close up now. So, yeah, I'm not going to adjust that height at all. Excellent. All right. Now I've got lots of those to cut. So these are all the parts of the front face. Dry assembled. I'm going to test them for square now, and once I've got everything square, I'm going to pre-drill the holes for the screws. I want to do that before I apply glue so I don't end up with glue all over the drill bit. Just a lot easier. I won't put the screws in, of course, until after everything's been glued. There'll be 3 frames like this, except without that beam. This is the only frame that'll have that beam for the front vise, but otherwise you'll have a 3-leg frame in the middle and a 3-leg frame at the end. That should make it heavy and strong. Anyway, let's check it for square. $196. Ah, beautiful. Ah, everything's come out so beautiful and square. Excellent. There we are, that's the first frame glued and screwed and ready to, well, it's not ready to go, it's going to dry overnight. 2 more similar to it to build. Then I've got to join them all together and then pop the top on. So I sanded this down to 180 grit now, and that feels lovely and smooth. I'm going to continue on and do the other lap joints along the top of the frame as well, and down the legs, and sand those nice and smooth down to 180, because effectively the front face will be a clamp. The whole front face will be a clamp. And I'll show you what I mean by that very shortly. Hang on. Here we go. I've got a couple of pieces of aluminium T-track. I've just rested the old vise, or actually, well, it is an old vise. This is the vise I'm going to restore and use on the new workbench. I've taken it off the end of this one. Taken it off that end of this one. Forgot my hands are out of shot then. So I've popped it on here just to get an idea of where to position this rail in relationship to it. And I think I'm going to go with the centre. I think the centre will do a great job. So I'm going to centre both of the aluminium rails on the first two legs there, and they will be my outboard support / extra clamping area. I'm going to find the centre of each of these. And that's probably the better pencil to use for that. This router bit is the same width as this T-track, so I'm going to use that for routing, and hopefully I can just do it in a couple of passes. It does mean I have to be fairly accurate. I do expect it to be too tight. If that's exactly the same width as this, which it seems to be, it's certainly within 0.04 of a mil from my measurements. First of all, let's get this set up so it's central. We've got our centre line to work to. Well, that's good. If I can just clamp that there now. Now here's the downside I'm going to have, is that the router fence here that's going to keep me on track, keep me going nice and straight, is too long to let me get all the way back like I need to. So I will have to do a little bit freehand, or, well, one way or another I'll have to do a little bit freehand. So to set the depth of cut, I'm going to use the T-track in here on the turret and drop that down now. Alrighty. That's a very tight fit, so we might have to go a tad deeper than that, but that's alright. It's better than going too much too soon. I've got my T-track installed now, so what I'm going to do is go around with a router and just round off these edges. I'll be interacting with the front, this being the front. I'll be interacting with it a lot because I'll be opening and closing drawers in here, clamping things to the front, and of course just generally working around the vise and the bench. So I don't want to cut myself on these sharp corners. So I'm going to quickly whip around with a router and just take a slight rounding to the corners. So I've left a slight overhang all the way around. Now the next stage is to route the edges flush. Vice is in place, so the next thing to do is to drill out the dog holes on top. And I'm going to use the path guide system to do that. You've probably seen this before. It uses the 4-3-5 right angle triangle rule, if you like, to lay out a series of 3mm holes that you then go over and drill out with a 20mm drill bit to end up with MFT3 style pattern holes in your top. Now I'm not going to drill holes in the whole thing, only where I think I need them, but I'm going to drill more 3mm holes than I think I need, just so I've got alignment points if I need to add more holes later. Anyway, here goes. I'm going to give the workbench a good shellacking. So I'm going to mix up some shellac. I've got myself some methylated spirits and some shellac. So I've already tipped some shellac into this container. Here's one I prepared earlier. And you can just see it's just a few flakes down the bottom. And I'm aiming for a fairly dark consistency like this one. This is a bit cloudy. I could filter it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave that. I think it gives a good effect. So you're just going to take the shellac here in the bottle and pour in the methylated spirits until it's just covered the top of the shellac. I'm going to keep the rest of that. I'll probably thin it down a bit more yet. We'll give that a good stir. And just have a look, see if we need any more methylated spirits. Oh, we definitely do. We definitely need more metho for that, which is good. Don't expect the flakes of shellac to all dissolve quickly. They'll take a while. You might have to leave it to sit overnight. That's certainly my intention with this. The only reason I'm giving it a good stir now is to give me an idea of how much more methylated spirits I need. And that doesn't matter either too much, because basically you just want them to break down first, and there's certainly enough in there to break those down. I think I am going to add a little bit more methylated spirits. I've never tried isopropyl alcohol instead of methylated spirits because isopropyl alcohol is expensive in Australia and comes in tiny bottles. I'm going to sand the top before I give that its shellacking, so I'm not going to start on the top. That was the one that's dissolving. This is today's, yes. Alright. So I'm going to do things like the vice today. Can you see the vice from there? One of the great things about shellac is it gives things a lovely golden glow. Look at that, that's beautiful. If it gets damaged, it's easily repaired, unlike a lot of other finishes. It doesn't offer quite the protection of some of the finishes, but it offers some. As you can see, it looks like a bomb has hit in here. Those are cabinets out of my old workbench, as are those stacked up in the corner behind the wood. And this is part of the top, which is still going to be chopped up. There's another piece outside, and another piece has already been chopped up and thrown away and put in the bin, all because of this little beauty in front of me. This is my new workbench, almost complete. I've got the vice in place and all the dog holes drilled. There's a couple more things to add to it, but we're going well. So that's my new workbench, so far at least. It's consumed my last couple of weeks, so that leaves me with a bit of tidying up to do. I've got old pieces of bench to dispose of. I've got tools with no home, they've got to find a new home. and so on. So there'll be a lot of that going on, a lot of general tidying. But no doubt I will have new videos coming out for you in the near future. So watch this space, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.